The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within.
The chill in the room gave way to real anger. Germany's defense minister Boris Pistorius said comparing European governments to authoritarian regimes was just unacceptable. There has also been a furious reaction in the European media, too. The speech has been called vengeful, preachy, unkind, and above all, widening the rift between America and its allies and friends. Meanwhile, all eyes had been on a meeting between the U.S. Vice President and Secretary of State and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. But after only half an hour, the discussion ended with no new information on how the U.S. would help bring an end to Russia's war with Ukraine. Or, crucially, what...
Kier Starmer probably thought this speech in Munich would be his big moment, a chance to show the world he's a strong leader, ready to put Britain back on the global stage. But instead of commanding respect, he got something else, something embarrassing.
I heard his speech, and I tell you, you're talking about JD's speech, right?
Yes, sir.
I heard his speech, and he talked about freedom of speech, and I think it's true in Europe. It's losing. They're losing their wonderful right of freedom of speech. I see it. I mean, I thought he made a very good speech, actually, a very brilliant speech. Yeah. Europe has to be careful. And he talked about immigration. And Europe has a big immigration problem. Just take a look at what's happened with crime. Take a look at what's happening in various parts of Europe. I thought his speech was very well received, actually. I've heard very good remarks.
Right there in front of world leaders, the US Vice President delivered a response that left Starmer completely exposed. It wasn't just a disagreement, it was a brutal reality check.
Of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility.
How did this happen? Why did Starmer walk into this international event thinking he had control, only to be left scrambling? And what does this tell us about how the world sees him as the UK's leader? This moment wasn't just about a bad speech, it was a warning sign.
They're all there every 2 weeks because I have to have it because I'm on social confinement. And this week I said, I'm going to say this because I feel different. I'm telling you, I know how I feel different. I know I'm only 2 months in. So why am I still being held in solitary confinement? Why am I not in a DCAT prison? And there's a mental health team there. I said, let me just ask you, is this good for me? She said, no. I said, how bad is it? Because I know how bad it is because I remember what happened last time. So I said, so why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And I'm a civil offender, so I got 18 months, which is insane anyway, for playing a film that they said wasn't in the public's interest. Well, I think it's on 115 million views. It certainly was in the public's interest, yeah? But they sentenced me to 18 months. Now, as a civil offender, you go to an open prison. What's the difference between that and how I'm being held?
A sign that Britain under Starmer is losing its standing, that his leadership isn't as strong as he claims, and that even our closest allies' eyes are starting to question his direction.
That we can do more together, in a few key areas in particular, promoting growth and prosperity, working together on shared challenges like climate change, energy security, and illegal migration, and strengthening our shared security and stability. So we're putting our relationship with Europe on a more solid, stable footing. That's what the British people want, a return to pragmatic, sensible leadership when it comes to dealing with our closest neighbours, because they know that this matters for growth, for jobs, and for security. The detailed work to take this forward starts now. We've agreed to hold regular UK-EU summits at leader level to review progress, starting with a summit.
Kier Starmer stepped onto the stage in Munich with a clear goal. He wanted to prove that Britain under his leadership was still a major force on the world stage. His speech was filled with bold claims about democracy, global cooperation and the UK's commitment to international stability.
The Labour government in Wales, Andy Burnham, Steve Khan, the teaching unions, and a recent poll showed 89% of Labour members support expanding free school meals to primary school children as a tool to boost attainment and ensure kids don't go hungry. Why won't you consider it?
Thank you. I mean, this is a healthy debate in the country and in the Labour Party, and obviously a number of councils, and the Wales and mayors have committed to.
He spoke about strengthening alliances with European partners, tackling global security threats and positioning Britain as a key player in shaping the future. But here's the problem. Words are easy and actions are what matter.
I visited a food bank here in Glasgow with Anas. You'll remember it, Anas. People queuing on their way home from work because their wages were not enough for what they needed. And it's as if that wasn't scandal enough. I met a little girl there. She must have been, I'd say probably about 8 or 9 years old, full of life, bags of personality. And at the end of the session at the food bank, I was recording a piece to camera with an autocue in the back of...
Starmer painted a picture of a strong, confident Britain, yet back home his leadership tells a different story. He wanted to show he could work hand in hand with world leaders, but the reality is, many are already questioning his ability to deliver. He tried to present himself as a unifier, someone who could mend relations with Europe after years of Brexit tensions. But does he influence to make that happen?
The principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy.
Can he convince the world that Britain is still a powerhouse when his own country is struggling with economic uncertainty, social division, and growing restrictions on free speech? This speech was supposed to be his moment to shine, to prove that Britain isn't fading into irrelevance. Instead, it raised more questions than answers. His vision sounded good on paper.
Yeah, let's see now. Let's call it Great Britain. It has a Prime Minister who sees widespread unrest over his appalling migration policies, and in order to shut it down, starts arresting people left, right and centre, and accusing those who worry about our escalating migrant crisis of being far-right thugs.
Absolutely.
That is an assault on freedom of speech, and that is exactly what J.D. Vance was talking about, and Kier Starmer is exactly who he was talking about. Let's remind ourselves, this is J.D., we've got a couple of clips from him, but this is him talking about Europe and free speech.
I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut...
But when put to the test, it clashed with the harsh reality of his leadership. And, as the US Vice President responded, it became clear that Starmer's carefully crafted message wasn't having the desired effect. Instead of looking like a strong leader, he looked like a man trying desperately to hold on to an image that no longer fits the reality of his government.
Question, but the medium-term question, which is where's the next generation of staff coming from?
Your own polling is showing how desperately
difficult it is for some people to get through to their GP. Now, at the beginning of this year, you were talking about changing the partnership model. You seem to have rode back from that. But how will people literally get through at 8 o'clock in the morning and see their GP?
Well, firstly, it's a massive anxiety. Anybody who's been on the 8 a.m. scramble knows just how difficult it is to get an appointment, and we've got to fix that. I do think that partnerships are gradually coming to an end. I've spoken to no end of doctors who say that they may be partners, but the other doctors aren't partners, don't really want to be partners, and there's not therefore a future in that model alone. So we haven't rode back from that. Obviously,
the moment Kier Starmer finished speaking, he probably expected a diplomatic nod, maybe even a polite acknowledgement from the US Vice President. However, what he got instead was something no leader wanted. An unexpected public rebuke that left him scrambling right. There, on an international stage, the Vice President didn't just disagree with him. They exposed the gap between Starmer's words and the actual reality. It wasn't just a small policy disagreement. It was a direct contradiction that shattered the image Starmer had tried so hard to build. Whether it was about the UK's global standing, its commitment to free speech, or its role in international security, the Vice President made it clear what Starmer was selling. They weren't buying.
Has been charged under the Terrorism Act. Helen Hoddenott is LBC's reporter with the details. Helen.
Well, that's right. Tommy Robinson pulled up to Folkestone police station in a black car this afternoon, wearing a black gilet, a jumper and jeans. He hugged supporters waiting outside for him, telling them he was there for telling the truth. Now, one of them asked what'll happen next, and he said, "I'll see what happens, mate. I don't expect to come back out here." His supporters then cheered and chanted his name as he entered the station, and a man carrying a duffel bag went in with him. Now, Kent police say that 41-year-old Stephen Yaxley Lennon, of no fixed address, was charged with failing to provide his mobile phone PIN to police under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act 2000, and that gives police officers the power to...
The message was simple. Britain under his leadership wasn't as strong, stable or influential as he claimed. The room went quiet. Some diplomats exchanged glances. Others took notes, and a few even looked surprised at the bluntness of the response. This wasn't just awkward, it was a moment to forget. It was humiliating when the leader of one of your closest allies publicly questioned your credibility. It doesn't just hurt your image, it damages your standing on the world stage.
And then they'll bring me in, and then they'll bring me in, I'll go in the shower room. Luckily, on my own, on my own in the shower room. But that's my routine. And then at 11:30, I'm put back in my cell. And then from 11:30 till the next morning, I'm sat in my cell. So 21 hours a day, I sit on that bed. Now, I wouldn't be moaning. I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but the injustice of it all is this shouldn't be happening. Why shouldn't it be happening? Because that's mental torture. Google solitary confinement. It's a decision that their own mental health teams in here have said will be devastating for my mental health. Yet the government are making a decision to hold me in these conditions for 9 months. I asked this week, how long will I be held like this? 9 months. So you're not going to send me to an open prison? Why not? Why not? And what's the difference? When I got sentenced in Belmarsh, when I got to prison, everyone who goes to jail now, because the prisons are full, everyone gets 60% off. Not me. I wasn't allowed 60% off. So everyone does. Everyone. I'm in every single prison. Because I'm not a criminal offender. I'm a civil offender, so I shouldn't even be in it. I'm not a criminal offender, so I get...
Starmer tried to brush it off, but the damage was done. This was more than a moment of embarrassment. It was a sign of how little confidence world leaders have in his leadership. If the US Vice President wasn't afraid to challenge him like this in public, what are they saying behind closed doors? This was supposed to be Starmer's big moment, a chance to prove his strength on the international stage.
Because once again, Labour rebuilt them. An NHS facing the future. More security and dignity at work. Town centres thriving. Streets safe. Borders controlled at last. Clean energy harnessed for national renewal. New homes, new towns, new hospitals, roads and schools. A new future for our children. That is what people will get. And mark my words, we will deliver it. People said we couldn't change the party, but we did. People said we wouldn't win across Britain, but we did. People say we can't deliver national renewal, but we can and we will.
In Instead, it ended with him looking weak, exposed, and completely out of his depth. Starmer wants to be seen as a strong global leader, but the truth is his leadership is already raising red flags both in the UK and abroad. His biggest challenge, convincing the world that Britain is still a beacon of democracy when his own government is cracking down on basic freedoms.
That's what I should be doing. Least of all for making a film. Like the judge is given the power to give 2 years prison sentence for contempt of court without a jury. I've never had a jury, ever. So a 2-year prison sentence, but he wouldn't be given that if it was 2 years of solitary confinement. It's insane. And as that continues, not just that, I now have the Attorney General has now invoiced me. They sentenced me to 18 months, put me on solitary confinement, and now they've charged me £81,000 that they want me to pay by the 7th of January. Well, guess what? I face another contempt of court case. So we're talking about terrorism. This is financial terrorism. The weaponisation of the judiciary to destroy dissident voices. That's exactly what it is. If this was happening in North Korea, China or Russia, every politician in our country would be screaming about this. But not a word. Not one single politician has mentioned this. No, if you have a film which is an expose of the corrupt judiciary, which is the most watched documentary Britain's ever seen, and not one MP spoke about it, or mainstream journalists, not even GB News. None of them have spoke about it.
Britain has always stood for free thought and open debate, but under Starmer, the UK is looking more like a surveillance state. World leaders are watching, and they don't like what they see. When a nation starts punishing its citizens for their beliefs, it loses moral authority on the world stage.
There are thousands upon thousands of American troops in Germany today. Do you think that the American taxpayer is going to stand for that if you get thrown in jail in Germany for posting a mean tweet? Of course they're not, right? So the point that I try to make to our European friends, and I think that there are friends, I believe that, I know President Trump does, is that friendship is based on shared values. You do not have shared values if you're jailing people for saying we should close down our border. You don't have shared values if you cancel elections because you don't like the result, and that happened in Romania. You do not have shared values if you're so afraid.
Starmer can talk about democracy all he wants, but actions speak louder than words right now. His actions are sending a message. Britain is no longer the strong, free nation it once was. Kier Starmer wants the world to see him as a strong, capable leader, but the reality is far different. Behind closed doors, allies are questioning whether Britain, under his leadership, can still be trusted as a serious global player. The UK was once a dominant force in international affairs, but under Starmer its influence is shrinking fast.
In my raping discussion I talk about Islam, not Muslims in general. Not every,
How can you talk about Islam and not talk about Muslims in general?
Because Islam's an idea, it's a book, it's an idea. To criticise that idea.
It's practiced by Muslims.
But if I criticise Christianity, I'm not...
World leaders have noticed, while he speaks about global cooperation, his weak leadership at home is making allies nervous. The US, once the UK's closest partner, is growing increasingly sceptical of his ability to lead European leaders who expected him to bring stability after Brexit, are finding him indecisive.
I think most people are more interested in what's going to happen to the NHS, frankly, than what's happening on Twitter. But you asked me a really important question that's been in the news for the last few days. I am going to, with permission, just answer it quite fully, because it is a really important set of issues. And let me start with this. Child sexual exploitation is utterly sickening, utterly sickening. And for many, many years, too many victims have been completely let down by perverse ideas about community relations, or by the idea that institutions must be protected above all else. And they've not been listened to, and they've not been heard. And when I was chief prosecutor for 5 years, I tackled that.
As a result, Britain, once America's closest and most reliable ally, was now being treated more like a secondary player. The public reaction wasn't much better. Many saw the moment as confirmation of what they already suspected. Starmer talks tough in speeches, but struggles when challenged. If you enjoyed this political discussion, like the video and subscribe to the channel to watch more fascinating political content.